Hello and welcome to Strategic Compass. Today I'm joined by Dr. Peter Hänseler, who is an expert on geopolitics, in particular based in Moscow. He's an expert on international law and international affairs. Peter, welcome to our program again, and I'm very glad to have you over again.
Thank you very much for having me.
Well, let's just get started, if you like, because I was looking forward to talking to you on a number of things, but particularly about the upcoming Trump-Putin meeting in Hungary. So, well, first, what is your sense about what are the expectations for both sides, particularly the Russian side? And what are all the political elite circles in Moscow? What are they thinking of about the meeting? Are they expecting anything specific might come out?
Yeah, I think we have seen now for quite some time the hot, cold shower Mr. Trump is giving to not only to Russia, but to basically everybody. Changing his attitude, sometimes on a monthly, sometimes on a weekly, and sometimes on a daily basis.
Even hourly.
Even hourly, yeah. And therefore, I see that when you hear sometimes people from the Pentagon and from Washington talking about the war, about the state of affairs in Russia, it seems that President Trump is very, very poorly informed when it comes to the progress on the front, on the one hand side, and then we are saying that over a million dead Russians and whatever. There is absolutely no basis for this information. And then on the other hand, there are people who are saying that the Russian economy is in dire straits. It's also completely wrong. I live there. I know it, and I have a lot of friends who have small companies. The inflation is coming down. The central bank rate came down from 21% to 17%. That means that is stabilizing. It's last year, I think the GDP plus was over 4%.
That's right.
Yeah. You always have to be careful.
And the previous year was quite up too.
Yeah, it's always up, and it's still up. And but I am not a big fan of the GDP measurement because whatever the government spends should not be in the GDP because it's basically sunk costs. Now, this wrong information coming from the United States, fueled by London, definitely. And the changing of position of President Trump leads necessarily to the fact that the Russians have not high expectations towards a quick agreement with the United States, and specifically not with Mr. Zelensky, who has completely lost his ground under his feet. I do think that the Russian strategy is relatively simple because on the front line, it's going extremely well for the Russians. The losses of the Ukrainians are horrendous. I have heard figures from Andrei Martyanov that it's 1 to 20, 1 to 25. This is a disaster for Ukraine and for the Ukraine people. This is also the opinion of the Russians, because it's like, it's basically from an emotional standpoint of view, a civil war. The Russians are very well able to conclude this military conflict on the field. They don't need the help of Mr. Trump, and this may also be one of the reasons why he, in the past few weeks, has been acting so aggressively against Russia. Because, you know, if you look at his ego-driven character, if he finds out that he's basically not needed in the process, then he reacts extremely aggressively. He's a very, very difficult character to judge. And the situation now, there were so-called experts who claimed that Mr. Putin is very much under pressure, and there was one geopolitical expert out of Brussels, Prof, who even talked that he will be ousted and whatever. There is absolutely no basis for this claim. Hard to say why there are people who are talking this way. You have seen him then, how he's old and, you know, old and tired. I think the Waldai, his speech, and then the press conference, I think was 4.5 hours in one go.
Well, he does it always 4.5 hours.
Yes,
he does it in Waldai all the time. You know, 4 hours, 4.5 hours. He's robust. You know,
I couldn't do that. I could 4.5 hours.
None of us could.
Hasan, when I talk with you for an hour, I'm tired. 4.5 hours, and, you know, in the view of millions of people, incredible.
I remember the last year's Waldai Forum where I was there, and then I was there, and the previous one again, 4 hours and 4.5 hours. I also remember Professor Luciano, a friend of mine, and, you know, he's the moderator, and he finally appeals to the president and says, you know, Mr. President, I think people are now quite tired, you know, and shall we end? But, you know, he looks quite happy to carry on with the conversation and Q&A.
And I saw him. I saw President Putin last Friday in the Bolshoi Theater. There was this 20-year party of RT Russia, and I was sitting in the front row and saw him a few meters from me. And he's so energetic, and think this is, you know. But you remember the stories. That was, I think, in 2022. Everybody. I think the Brits brought it up, MI6, that Mr. Putin is basically dying within the next 3 months.
Oh yes, also, he had all sorts of diseases.
Yes, and
according to the reports,
yeah, he will survive us all. And at the end of the day, this is also an indication. If you look at what I think it was also J.D. Vance who talked extremely negatively about the Russian economic situation. You know, when people get desperate, they're resorting to tactics like that. I am, you know, as a Russian, you have to be carefully optimistic about everything. The Russians are extremely professional in their diplomatic behavior, and they will always negotiate, and at the end of the day also in parallel work in the field at the front. And at the end of the day, you know, if Mr. Trump would agree with Mr. Putin, we have to be aware of the fact that this is not enough. I am sure that he could force the Europeans into it, but with Mr. Zelensky, it is very difficult. And I hear from my contacts in the Ukraine that the people have enough, because now the destruction of the electric grid in the Ukraine is ongoing. and we already have some, 0 degrees at night in Moscow. If you have no power, no heating, then you don't have water because of the pumping systems don't work. This is not an undiluted pleasure to live in.
It's miserable.
It's very, very miserable, and I feel extremely sorry for everybody who is, has to live under these circumstances.
Well, can I just intervene to ask a little question in between? That's could actually Trump force the European governments, in particular German government, French government, and the British government? The three are almost on their high horses, in carrying on with the war, or with the sort of high demands, like if Trump is going to arrange a ceasefire, just a ceasefire as it is, right on the front lines without any other arrangements and whatever, then we are going to send in troops to basically protect the ceasefire kind of thing. These are totally unacceptable from the Russian side, by the Russians, aren't they? And could actually Trump simply stop them and saying, stop all this idiocy, none of this works. Come to your senses kind of thing.
I assume he could. I do not understand his, I do not understand his strategy, and maybe Mr. Trump himself doesn't understand his own strategy. That any freeze of the conflict and any ceasefire without peace attached to it is absolutely unacceptable to the Russians. That will never happen. Full stop. Will not happen. We don't even have to discuss it. It's a waste of you and my time. What is discussed in the West and what is discussed in the Western newspaper doesn't really, it doesn't bring anything.
No. Because while the Russians have the upper hand in the fighting, why should they stop basically right on the front line without any peace treaty or even ceasefire arrangements attached to it? Something like no European country can ever send troops here, no blah blah, and in the end the Ukrainian side will have to withdraw from this part and that part, indicating what sort of a peace treaty it is going to take shape in the end. Why would they stop?
No, they don't. Fully agree with you. Why? And at the end of the day, people always are. There's still people who saying, this war started in 2022. Since Mr. Putin is in since 1991, and you can go back to the Second World War or to the end of the Second World War. The Russians have now invested a lot of time, a lot of blood, a lot of money, a lot of weapons, and a lot of energy into this, and they will. They want to settle this this issue for good, or at least for the next, I don't know, 50 or 100 years, and have finally peace on their western front, western border. Sorry.
Okay, just carry on. You were basically explaining why the Russians basically don't have high expectations of the meeting between the two leaders because of Trump's very moody attitude. I mean, I totally agree. He gets, I think his strategy, if he has any, is flawed in the sense that on the one hand, he does seem to want to end the conflict, but at the same time, he wants to make money out of it. So he says to the Europeans, and look, if you want to send weapons to the Ukrainians, you have to buy it from us. Okay, so the Europeans say, blah, blah, okay, we are prepared to buy the weapons. But whether they can buy the weapons, whether the US, defense industry can produce as many weapons as needed,
Okay, they cannot. Here, I can maybe interrupt you. That is the biggest problem is, they're happy to sign up the Europeans, and receive billions and billions in payments. but the industrial and also the military-industrial output capabilities of the United States are extremely limited. And that means if you Patriot system, if you order 10, they can deliver a few within 1 year. The capacities are extremely limited. And if you look at the artillery and rockets, Russia as one single country is outproducing the whole NATO, including the United States, by 1 to 10.
Exactly.
The Russians have set up industrial capacity in the past few years, and they have done that extremely efficiently. That is also one of the main reasons why the inflation went up, because there were a lot of people needed for this kind of production. And then the Kremlin said, we have to build this factory and, start to produce in, I don't know, X days. Then you need X amount of people, and you find them in the market if you pay more. That is one of the reasons. That is one of the reasons of the inflation. And we do not have to discuss whether the Russians, including all the leaders, including Mr. Putin, they are really craving an end to this conflict. You will not find. I have not met a single person in Russia who is who likes this war to go on. It's a disaster, and I don't know. There are no clear numbers of fallen Russian soldiers, but I believe there are around 100,000 soldiers. 100,000 soldiers is a lot of people, and I know families who have lost fathers and sons. It's not to the extent like it is in the Ukraine. In the Ukraine, I think that was an official paper which was leaked, said from 1.7 million dead and missing in action people. That was 2 months ago, and they lose around 50 to 60,000 a month. This is and you can always say, yeah, the Russians don't lose a lot of people. But if it's your son or your husband,
yeah, that's a different thing. Yeah,
it is, and it is. I know people at the front, and when you talk, this is for everybody a traumatic experience. This is not something you want to do. The only guys who want to prolong this war is people who benefit financially out of this.
What about the Ukrainian psyche? That is, when it comes to I think it's crashing in every sense, because they are basically getting whoever they can see in the street, basically grabbing people into the minibuses and vans, and then after a very short period of training, sending them to the meat grinder front lines.
Have you been to the military service, Hasan?
Shortly, yes.
Yeah, I went in Switzerland. 17 weeks, 4.5 months.
You've done longer than I did.
And then every year you have a repetition course, and after 17 months, you just hope that you don't have to do anything because you're not an able soldier. And in Ukraine, the training is 14 days. This is ridiculous.
It is.
You hear that these young people who are, and very old people, who they send to the front, at the sound of the first shot they run. That means there is no coherent fighting anymore on the Ukrainian side, and there are whole parts of the front which are basically not protected. It's a disaster. It's a disaster for the people. The atmosphere in the Ukraine is a catastrophe. Not only because there is no economy left to speak of. They are 100% dependent on the help of Europe, and I don't know whether 60 or 70% of the money which flows to Ukraine is disappearing. I heard that Mr. Zelensky sends $50 million every month to an account in Saudi Arabia. I don't know. I could not verify this information, but I would not be surprised. And that is what I am told. That the majority of the people want to have peace, and they are happy to give up the Russian-speaking regions in order to have peace. It is a disaster for these people, and I feel sorry every day.
What about the Russian military strategy? We keep hearing that the Russians, on the one hand, are, certainly leading the war in the front line. There's no question about it. But in terms of the military strategy, are they actually going for Kiev, or are they going for Odessa to basically turn the whole Ukraine into a landlocked country? Or are they just making sure that in the Donetsk, in the Donbas region, they get absolute control? They bring all the territories under their control, so that in an eventual peace treaty there would be no obstacle in the Russian takeover of Donbas and what have you, or anything you hear about?
Okay, Lugansk, Donetsk, and Zaporozhye and Kherson, they're already Russian.
They are. But they haven't brought under their control the whole oblast.
Yeah, more and more now. And the question is, there are so many opinions whether they should take Odessa, whether they should take Kharkov, because it's extremely close to the Russian border. And what they will do is, whether Odessa, it's Russian speaking, thing would make sense. I have there is no reliable information about, and this is quite a feat if they have to take it. This is, if you look at the map, that's not a walk in the park. Very, very difficult to say. What they will definitely do is to have a demilitarization, a security field east, respectively north of the border of these four regions. Whether it's 100, whether it's 200 kilometers, I don't know. I cannot say that, and I do not believe that if these questions are asked, there is basically there is no information coming out. That means the Kremlin doesn't they don't give out the information. I wouldn't do either. They're not American.
Of course,
they're not American. It's a different mentality. Would it make sense to take Odessa and Kharkov? Yes, it would make sense. Then there are rumors that the Russians want to take the whole Ukraine. That is definitely not the case. The Russians definitely do not want to have regions where they're not welcome. In the four regions which we mentioned before, there were referendums, and I think in favor were about 96%. That was not a sham referendum, but a real referendum. And this is a mistake the Russians would never do. If you look at the Second World War, if you are sitting on land and people do not appreciate your presence, that you will not be happy. This is an impossibility. The Russians have no interest. The Russians have also. They have basically no interest in increasing the size of Russia. That was never the case, and you remember the negotiations in Istanbul in March, April 2022. on the agreement, they would have kept the Crimea, but the other 4, which are nowadays part of Russia, they would have given them up if the minority rights of the Russian population would have been obeyed. It means that this is basically the proof that the Russians have no territorial hunger, imperialistic ambitions. Yes.
Well, I agree. After all, you know, Turkey, for instance, in terms of the land mass, it is the largest country in Europe, and Russia is 20 times Turkey. But Russian population is about 140 million. Turkey's population is coming up to 19, and perhaps Turkey and Russia will have almost the same number of people in about 30 years or so. And then what would the Russians want more territory for? I mean, this is a question we should ask to, what's his name, Rutte, the Secretary General of NATO, because he keeps talking about the Russian grab of the whole of Europe. And it seems the European so-called liberal governments absolutely believe in that. Now, you are also following the political developments in Europe, you know, in Germany, in France. So what is your sense, actually? On the one hand, you have the governments which are propagating all these fears, you know, pumping all these fears onto the people. But it seems neither in Germany, nor in France, nor in Britain, people are buying those fears, aren't they?
Yeah, hard to say. Let's assume the group of skeptics is growing in Western Europe. That is definitely the case. Especially if you look now at Germany, you know, the former Eastern Germany, there the population is adamantly against this warmongering out of Berlin. You also have to understand why, you know, it's a ridiculous plan of Mr. Merz when he says, you know, until 2030 we'll have the strongest army in Europe. I bet everything I have on the fact that they would never ever even reach the strength of the Turkish army. You know, the Turkish army is most probably the only army in Europe which you can take for, you know, seriously. It's a serious force. And you know, if you look at in Germany, who wants to go into the army, that is, you know, nobody, because, you know, people who are, if you stand still and think for 30 seconds, you know that you're going to die. And then you have the German army on the other hand, and I have friends who have colleagues and friends and sons in the army. And the brainwashing there is obviously that much advanced that the office of the German officers, I don't know everybody, but there are a lot of officers and members of the German army who believe they will be able to win against the Russians. But then you have to also look, you know, why? Because if you look at it from a rational standpoint of view, the Germans, the Frenchies, and the Brits could maybe, if they really squeeze, each send 10,000 people to Russia, which have no experience in fighting at all, except a self-confidence which is much too big. The reason why they do it is if Germany has no enemy and France has no enemy and the British have no enemy, their governments would fail within 48 hours. The economical situation is in dire straits. and you know, if everything fails, as Mr. Celente said, as always, if everything fails, let's go to war. And I do believe that this is the reason, and that is also the justification to spend a lot of money and to print a lot of money. Because the situation is, especially in Germany, I know the situation a little bit better than in, you know, I'm not an expert in everything, but I follow the German news and the German business news very closely. And their industry, especially the car industry, is in dire straits.
It is.
This is, and you know, I always write that is the problem of the German mentality. You know, the consciousness of history is not here. That means people are not very well educated about their own history, and that's why history repeats. And the Germans, you know, I grew up in German-speaking Switzerland. I'm deep inside a little bit an anarchist, as every good Swiss should be. Not trusting the government, but the Germans have that trait that they, and if you look at the history, it repeats itself. They believe the government, and even if they do not agree, they don't stand up. I don't know, you know, you can tell me a little bit about the Turkish mentality, how that works. But the Germans, when the Germans stand up, it's too late. And I think it is already too late from an economical standpoint of view. It's a matter of time until this whole economy will really collapse. On top of it, with the international financial markets, this is crazy. I am flabbergasted that it's still somehow floating. And if you look now, you know, the gold and the precious metal market and whatever, and you know, we have there is a lot, you know, and then in the bond market and in the private equity market and in the private debt market and in the valuations of the stock markets, everywhere where you look, you know, you pale. I don't know. I always say I consider the biggest geopolitical risk is the international, or especially the Western financial markets. If they fail, this will be the biggest problem for the West.
Well, it would, you know, it would be a huge problem, not only for the West, but it would also affect world markets worldwide. There's no question about it. But in terms of the attitude of the three major European countries to the war in Ukraine, namely Germany, France, and Britain, they seem to be talking a bit, you know, the sort of talk they do is basically doing nothing other than encouraging those in Ukraine, namely Zelensky and his entourage, if you like, into the war, because they have committed themselves to the continuation of the war. There is nothing else they can do, Zelensky and the company. And then the German government, the French government, and the British government are just wasting their resources on a war that has been already lost. So other than that, they're not doing anything. I think it is, don't you think that there is also the ideological dimension to that? So the liberal way of thinking was that, you know, if you know, they can easily suffocate the Russian economy, they can bring them into their knees, they can do this to Russia. They, you know, after all, it was a big country, but its GDP was just $1.5 trillion, the size of Spain. So it's a regional country. You don't have to take it so seriously, kind of. propaganda, which the propaganda which they created, but which they believe in now. And as you said, for instance, if the war is over, because the shape of their own economy is so bad in their own countries, they will have to face up to the enormous problem coming from inside. For instance, in Britain, the other day, I talked to a former colleague, colleague from Oxford, and then we had a good interview, and we had a good, basically, talk on the situation in Britain. I said, what is it that, those times when I spend in Britain are completely over. You have people in the streets, and then there is all this clash between the British people, people of Britannic origins, but as opposed to what they call migrants and all that. And he said, for instance, he gave me some figures. I think people under 30, the young people, more than 40% of them don't believe in democracy anymore. And they seem to, they openly say democracy doesn't work. We need strong leaders because we can't get all these migrants out of the country, whether legal or illegal, doesn't matter, kind of attitude, because the economy is in dire straits. So, the French situation is not much better. The German situation may be slightly better, but only slightly. So what I'm saying is, instead of tackling all these problems inside their own countries, dealing with a war, which they sell to the public as something winnable, seems to be a better political path that they follow.
Yeah, I had a discussion with my German friends last weekend, and we asked each other, you become absolute power, you get absolute power in your country, what would you do? And that means no democracy, nothing. You could really basically rule, and things would happen. And I don't want to have this job, and nobody wants to have this job, because this situation is ongoing for a very, very long time. Mrs. Merkel, for example, she was for 16 years in power. What did she actually do? Basically nothing. And then, especially after, since COVID, what have the governments of the European countries done since the beginning of 2020? That's now nearly 6 years. And then you look at what has been achieved, what has been done. You can say, okay, they tackled in a disastrous way. They tackled this COVID situation, and after COVID came the Ukrainian war. That means it's complete standstill. Nothing happens. If you look at the approval rating from Keir Starmer, I think it's 11%. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think
so. Yeah, it's very, very low in the perhaps historical low.
Yeah, Mr. Merz is at 20. That means 80% are against him. And then if you talk about democracy, let's define democracy. This is no democracy anymore. I do not think. And now a Swiss is speaking. The EU, this is an oligarchy managed by Mrs. von der Leyen, who has not been elected. These power bases in the EU, these people are not elected. These are, basically oligarchs which have been selected by special interest groups. This is a complete disaster, and people start to see that. Now, when the young people say, you know, democracy doesn't work, yeah, then you have to say, you know, how do you define it? And, you know, what we have now is definitely not a democracy. Then we have also the issue of competence. The people who are in power now, I haven't seen a competent person in Europe in the driver's seat of any country. You know, we always criticize and we always say, you know, we have the freedom, we have the thing. And in Russia, you know, this dictatorship. It's also completely untrue. You know, Mr. Putin is elected every 5 years, and he is elected by 80, last time 86%, but in average in the last 25 years, it's 80%, and not because people love him. You know, the Russians don't love their president. This is, if you make a statement like that, you're completely naive. Then you don't understand how, you know, the Russian mentality. The Russians are skeptics, and Mr. Putin gets these results because he did a good job. Period. End of the thing. It's a result-based voting of the Russian people, and the system in Russia, you know, if you look at the central banker, Miss Nabiulina, if you look at the people in the military sector, in the economic sector, in the diplomatic sector, these are among all top people. That means the Russian system is obviously able to find competent people for their jobs, and we in the West are not able to do that. And, you know, there's a laughing stock of Mrs. Baerbock and whatever, and so, you know, yeah, and it is not only in Germany, it's basically everywhere. People have no competence, and that is the big problem. That's why, you know, we should really think, you know, what system is good for the people at the end of the day, and let's look at the results, not at some, you know, some about freedom and democracy. You know, the freedom of speech in Russia is much bigger than in England, in Great Britain, or in Germany, or in France.
Oh, definitely. Well, my colleagues and friends in Germany are afraid of talking about even, you know, not even criticizing the West in the smallest way, but, you know, even in every sense. So when they come round to Istanbul, Ankara, they are quite, how shall I say, fluent in their criticism of their of the handling of the war by their governments, by Europe in general, but not in Germany. And again, Professor Alfred Desayas joined me on this program once or twice, and on both occasions he mentioned the miserable judiciary situation in Germany in particular. He said, you know, they invite me to conferences, they invite me to give lectures and all that. I turn them down because I don't want to face legal prosecution, you know, as a result of what I say. I don't want to waste my money. I don't want to waste my energy and my time. He says he's quite right. And, you know, in Russia, you know better than everybody, you know, you get critical views against the handling of the government, say either of Ukrainian war or something else.
Yes, I have. There are critical statements about Mr. Putin's policy with regard to war, with regard to economy, whatever. It's fine, you know. Yeah. People have. They're not primitive in their behavior, how they phrase things. You know, they have it's a cultured people. But you know, and you know, when we with friends in restaurants or whatever, and it's loud and thing and so, and we disagree, and there is absolutely no fear of the government, and that is definitely not the case anymore in Germany. And you know, as you know, we have a lot of German officers, and they are concerned. They are concerned for their security and for their freedom.
Well, it's really, I mean, to see Germany getting to that stage, is really, how shall I say, unbelievable, you know, given what Germany was about. Now, shall I take you for a few minutes at least, because we are to something eastward for a bit, because I know you've been following that front too. I've read your op-eds, your large analysis actually on the 12 days war between Iran and Israel. Now, since the 12 days war, over the last particularly few weeks, there has been enormous news, you know, streaming out of either Western outlets, but also from other outlets too, indicating that a second round of Israeli-Iran standoff or clash is just in the offing. Is that also your sense? You know, how do you see those reports?
Yeah, if you look at the military movements of tanker planes to Qatar, it looks like there is some preparation. Always very hard to judge. I think to hit Iran again, that would be mad.
Certainly.
Absolutely mad. Because they're beefing up their air defenses. I have heard that they have received S-400 from Russia, and also a lot of equipment from the Chinese. I cannot. There is absolutely no way to verify these things, at least not from me. I have met Professor Mohamed Marandi this weekend, talked to him. He confirmed my view that the Iran has the capability to basically completely destroy Tel Aviv. They have not prepared a war against Israel for 40 years, but they have prepared for a war against the United States for 40 years. With regard to the technological levels, they're capable of developing, you know, with hypersonic missiles. They are more advanced than any Western country, including the United States, including Israel. And if you look at the reports in Israel, this Iron Dome has not worked at all.
No.
If you look at the level of destruction, I wrote about that, of the port of Haifa and of Tel Aviv. You don't see, you know, I saw information on X. On X, I think that was the best source. You know, if you don't have, I don't have access to secret services. The direct thing, I do not have that.
None of us has.
And what I saw there was incredible, and later it has been taken down. You know, you always have to be very quick and then save it down. They're bad if they do it, and because the Americans, and the Israelis cannot attack. They cannot attack without the help of the Americans. They simply have the capabilities to do that. The answer of Tehran would be swift and brutal. That is my expectation. And you know, Qatar and all the military bases would be in danger. The potential of escalation is high, and then If you look at Mr. Netanyahu, who is a complete nut job for me. He's absolute as a crazy psychopath. If they get cornered by the Iranians, I have not the slightest doubt that they will use a nuke. They have some nukes, and they would use it in Iran. I do not think that this will be, lead to the destruction of Iran, but it would set a precedent which is hellish for the future of our unstable world. The whole peace in Gaza, I think, that was very funny. I met our American friends in Moscow together, and Larry Jones and the judge and Scott Ritter and everybody. And then I said, would it be crazy to say if I claim that Mr. Trump wanted to get the Nobel Prize for Peace as the most peaceful person we have all met in the 21st century, that maybe this was just a PR stunt to get the Gaza peace in order to get the prize, and he didn't get it. And now what I expect, and I think everybody agreed with me, what I expect now is that there will be some false flag and some bomb in Tel Aviv or in Jerusalem, and then blame it on Hamas, and then the killing will go on, because the long-term goal, I say the long-term goal since 1948 of Israel is Greater Israel. And, I don't know whether you have seen all the maps, but, in Turkey, there are maps which include a part of Turkey in the Greater Israel. I don't know the plans of that, but I do not believe that it is in Mr. Netanyahu's also personal interest to have a long-lasting peace there. He has to escalate, and he will escalate. I'm pretty sure that the Gaza peace will not hold. With regard to Iran, I don't know what is your, I'm sure you have the same fears. How dangerous is it in your personal opinion, what you have heard? Because I
agree. I absolutely agree that they're going to have a second round with Iran. In normal circumstances, they shouldn't touch Iran again, because in the first round, they didn't expect that Iran had produced those sophisticated missiles with which they bombed Israel down into almost like an archaeological site, and they could have done much more because they showed their capability. And now, as you said, they are upgrading their air defenses. They have both numerous warplanes, MiG-29s, Sukhoi 35s, and as well as the J-10CE Chinese planes, which are very, they outperform the Indian Air Force with their sophisticated missiles and radar systems. And the Chinese are also upgrading the Iranian air defenses and all that. Normally, you would expect the Israelis and the Americans not to basically get in the way of the Iranians, not to provoke them so much, because they should know what they are going to get as a result. But this is what we are talking about is sober-minded, normal people. When you have people living in fool's paradise, or psychopaths, as you described them, or people full of medieval legends and blah, blah, and then you can imagine, you can basically expect anything to come out of these people. So in that sense, I am not necessarily optimistic about a peaceful scenario, certainly not in Gaza, nor in a Israeli-Iran relationship. And I think they are going to try their luck once more. But I hope that it is not going to turn nuke, because I have a suspicion that the Iranians might have nuclear weapons, or they could just, make it in a few days, because they have all the material, as they say. All the components are ready. The plutonium is there to make at least 5 to 15 nuclear bombs, and one is much more than enough to wipe out Israel. So I don't know why the Israeli, particularly the incumbent government, is so bullish in their attitude. You can never tell, because when you have psychopaths and people or medieval-minded in the saddle, anything can happen. Sorry.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's very dangerous and very, very hard to judge. I've been to Iran twice. I've talked to a lot of people. These are very, very soft people, and that has always been the reaction now so far. Also the military answer has always been in a way not to escalate the whole thing. I do not believe that they will answer nuclear. I do not believe that the Russians or the Chinese would let them. You have the Pakistanis who said, in case. I agree with you with that. But I just, I really hope to God that this will not happen, because, it would send this threshold once crossed would be a disaster for the rest of the world. And here, I can only hope. I share with you how dangerous it is, and that yes, destroying Israel is one thing, because it's so small, and Iran is absolutely huge, and I hope it will not come. But what's interesting, the decapitation hits against Iranian military and government. Professor Marandi told me, we're all prepared, and there is the second and the third and the fourth already in line. That means even this will, if this will happen, they're prepared. They're really prepared for this. And he's also, he's in danger. Mr. Professor Marandi, I'm sure that he's on some list with some organizations we both know, and absolutely relaxed about the whole thing, which is more than impressive.
Well, thank you very much. We've covered quite a lot of ground, actually, again, and it's always very good to talk to you about geopolitical matters and global affairs.
Thank you very much. It's always a joy to have a discussion with you.
Well, thank you very much, and hope to see you in person somewhere in Russia.
Yes, we are planning on this one.
Hopefully. And shall we conclude with this, the program? I think you had about an hour. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you, sir.
Ladies and gentlemen, we've come to the end of our program today. We have hosted Dr. Peter Hänseler, a geopolitical expert based in Moscow, following Russian, European, and Middle Eastern politics. Thank you very much for watching us, and until we get back online with another topic and another expert to discuss the geopolitical issues. Bye-bye for now.